The first shot rang out just as Olivia Daniels ducked behind the water trough, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It wasn't how she'd planned to arrive in Copper Creek, but then again, nothing in her life had gone according to plan since she'd left Boston 3 months ago. "Stay down, miss!" A deep voice called out from somewhere to her left, as another bullet splintered the wooden beam above her head. Olivia pressed her tall frame lower, cursing the distinctive height that made her such an easy target. At 5 feet 11 inches, she'd always stood out in a crowd, especially in a dusty frontier town where most women barely reached her shoulder. The gunfire ceased momentarily, and she heard the sound of boots crunching on gravel, approaching her hiding spot. Instinctively, she reached for the small derringer tucked in her boot, a gift from her late father, who'd always insisted a woman traveling alone needed protection. "You can come out now, miss. He's gone." The voice was closer now, a rich baritone with a hint of Texas in it. Cautiously, Olivia peered over the edge of the trough. A man stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. In one hand, he held a Colt revolver, still smoking slightly. "Who was shooting at me?" she demanded, struggling to her feet with as much dignity as her dust-covered traveling dress would allow. The stranger holstered his weapon and offered a calloused hand. "Name's Grant Lawson, miss. And that wasn't you they were aiming for, that was me. Sorry to have gotten you caught in the crossfire." Olivia ignored his outstretched hand and brushed the dust from her skirts. "Well, Mr. Lawson, that's hardly comforting. I've been in town less than 10 minutes, and I'm already being shot at by association." He chuckled, a warm sound that seemed out of place amid the lingering scent of gunpowder. "Welcome to Copper Creek, 1878. Not exactly the greeting committee you were expecting, I reckon." As Olivia stood to her full height, she noticed something unusual. She was looking the cowboy nearly straight in the eye. At 6 feet even, Grant Lawson was one of the few men she'd met who didn't tower over her. "You're a tall one," he remarked, though there was no mockery in his tone, just simple observation. Olivia stiffened, prepared for the usual teasing that followed such comments. "Yes, Mr. Lawson, I am aware. They called me too tall back east." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. To her surprise, the cowboy laughed, not unkindly, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "Then I'll be taller with you beside me," he said with an easy smile. "Most folks around here barely come up to my chin. It's nice meeting someone I don't have to bend down to talk to." Something about his response made Olivia's cheeks warm. Unlike the cruel jests she'd endured in Boston society circles, his words held no sting. Before she could respond, a portly man in a sheriff's badge came huffing down the street. "Lawson, was that Reeves again?" the lawman called out, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Grant nodded. "Third time this week, Sheriff. Getting bolder, too. Shooting in broad daylight." The sheriff noticed Olivia and touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, sorry about the welcome. Tom Reeves has a grudge against our Mr. Lawson here, and he's not particular about who gets caught in the middle. I'm Olivia Daniels," she introduced herself, retrieving her small valise from where she'd dropped it. "I've come to take the teaching position at the schoolhouse." Recognition dawned in the sheriff's eyes. "The schoolmarm from Boston. We've been expecting you, Miss Daniels, though we thought you'd be arriving on tomorrow's stage." "I took an earlier connection in Denver," she explained. "I was hoping to have time to settle in before meeting my students." Grant Lawson's expression changed subtly. "The school board will be mighty pleased you're here, Miss Daniels. We haven't had a proper teacher since old Mrs. Wilkins passed last winter." The sheriff nodded enthusiastically. "The town council's fixed up the teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's small but comfortable. Lawson here can show you the way his ranch borders the school property." "I wouldn't want to impose," Olivia began, but Grant was already reaching for her valise. "No imposition at all," he said. "My wagon's just down at Thompson's store. I can take you and your belongings to the cottage." As they walked down the dusty main street, Olivia was acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. A woman of her height was unusual enough, but walking alongside a man of nearly equal stature made them a striking pair. "Don't mind the staring," Grant said quietly. "New faces are rare enough in Copper Creek. A beautiful new schoolteacher is practically an event." Olivia nearly stumbled at his casual compliment. In Boston, men had courted her younger sister, petite and delicate as a porcelain doll. No one had ever called Olivia beautiful, interesting, perhaps, or striking, but never beautiful. "My trunks will arrive on tomorrow's stage," she said, changing the subject. "I hope the cottage has adequate storage." "It's simple but solid," Grant replied as they reached his wagon. "The ladies of the town sewed new curtains and quilts, and there's a small garden out back that Mrs. Peterson's been tending." As he helped her onto the wagon seat, his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and Olivia felt a strange flutter in her chest. "Why does this man Reeves want to kill you?" she asked, as Grant urged the horses forward. His smile faded. "That's a long story, Miss Daniels. Let's just say some men don't take kindly to losing what they never rightfully owned." The wagon rattled past the last buildings of Copper Creek, heading toward a small white schoolhouse visible on a gentle rise about a half-mile outside town. Behind it, nestled among a stand of cottonwood trees, was a modest cottage with a freshly painted porch. "It's lovely," Olivia murmured, surprised by the picturesque setting. "The children are excited to meet you," Grant said as he brought the wagon to a halt. "There are 23 of them, ages 5 to 16, all eager for learning." "You seem to know a lot about the school situation," Olivia observed as he helped her down. His hand on her waist was steady and strong. "I'm on the school board. It was my letter you responded to." Olivia remembered the neatly penned correspondence that had brought her west. "You're G. Lawson," she realized. "I had assumed you were George or Gregory." "Just Grant," he said with a smile. "Named after the general. My father served under him during the war." He carried her valise to the cottage door and produced a key. The town had a proper lock installed. Copper Creek safe enough, but a lady living alone should have security. The interior of the cottage was simple but comfortable. A small sitting room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a bedroom with a maple bed frame, and a small study lined with empty bookshelves. "My books will fill those nicely," Olivia said, already envisioning her collection of literature and reference volumes. "I hope you'll find everything suitable," Grant said, setting her valise on a chair. "Mrs. Peterson left a basket of provisions in the kitchen, and there's water drawn from the well out back." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. You've been most kind." He lingered in the doorway, hat in hand. "School starts Monday. That gives you 4 days to settle in. If you need anything, my ranch is just over that ridge to the west. You can see the chimney from your back porch." After he left, Olivia stood in the center of her new home, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. This small cottage represented everything she'd hoped for when she'd answered the advertisement for a frontier schoolteacher: independence, purpose, and a fresh start, far from the whispers and pitying glances of Boston society. She unpacked her valise, hanging her few dresses in the small wardrobe. From the bottom of the bag, she withdrew a framed daguerreotype of her parents, taken just before her father's illness had claimed him. Her mother had followed him to the grave just months later, leaving Olivia and her sister alone. Her sister had married well, to a banker's son who provided handsomely for her. But Olivia, despite several seasons in society, had found no such match. Too tall, the whispers went. Too bookish, too opinionated. So, when the letter from Copper Creek had arrived, seeking an educated woman to teach the town's children, Olivia had seized the opportunity. What did it matter if she never married? Here she could make a difference. The next morning, Olivia was awakened by a knock at her door. Hastily donning a wrapper over her nightgown, she found a young girl of about 12 standing on her porch, a basket in her hands. "Good morning, Miss Daniels," the girl said politely. "I'm Emma Peterson. Ma sent me over with some fresh eggs and bread, and to see if you might need any help getting settled." "That's very kind, Emma," Olivia replied, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Please come in." As she prepared tea, Olivia learned that Emma would be one of her students, along with her 2 younger brothers. The girl chattered happily about the school and the town, providing Olivia with valuable insights about her future pupils. "Mr. Lawson's the smartest man in the county," Emma declared, as she helped Olivia unpack dishes from a crate that had been left in the kitchen. "He's got more books than anybody, even more than the preacher. He lets us borrow them sometimes." "Is that so?" Olivia's interest was piqued. A cowboy who valued books was an intriguing contradiction. "He's not like other ranchers," Emma continued. "He reads poetry and speaks French. Ma says he was educated back east before his family came west. Throughout the day, more visitors arrived, women bringing food and welcome gifts, men offering to chop wood or make small repairs to the cottage. By evening, Olivia had met nearly half the town, their names and faces blending together in her tired mind. Just as she was preparing for bed, there was another knock. Opening the door, she found Grant Lawson standing on her porch, a leather-bound book in his hands. "I apologize for the late hour," he said, "but I thought you might enjoy this." He held out the book, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets. "Reading always helps me settle into a new place." "How thoughtful," Olivia said, genuinely touched as she accepted the volume. "Please, come in for a moment." In the lamplight, she noticed details about him she'd missed in the chaos of their first meeting. His hair was dark brown with hints of copper, his eyes a clear green that reminded her of the sea glass she'd collected as a child. Though his clothes were frontier practical denim trousers, a chambray shirt, and a leather vest, they were clean and well kept. "Your cottage looks more homelike already," he observed, glancing around at the small touches. Olivia had added a crocheted doily on the side table, a colorful quilt draped over the rocking chair. "The people here have been remarkably welcoming," she said. "I've received enough food to last a week." Grant smiled. "Folks have been looking forward to your arrival. Most of them never had much schooling themselves, but they want better for their children. And what about you, Mr. Lawson? Emma Peterson tells me you're quite the scholar yourself." A hint of color touched his tan cheeks. "Hardly a scholar, Miss Daniels. My mother was a teacher before she married. She made sure my education didn't end when we left Philadelphia." "How long have you been in Colorado?" she asked, curious about this unusual cowboy. 15 years. I was 16 when my father decided to seek his fortune in ranching rather than banking. My mother," he hesitated, "she never quite adapted to frontier life. She passed away from pneumonia our second winter here." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "I lost both my parents within a year of each other." Their eyes met in shared understanding. For a moment, something electric passed between them, recognition of kindred spirits perhaps, or simply human connection in a place where both felt somewhat apart. Grant cleared his throat and took up his hat. "I should let you rest. Your trunks arrived on this evening's stage. I've arranged for them to be delivered tomorrow morning." "Thank you," Olivia said, walking him to the door. "And thank you for the book." He paused on the threshold, his tall frame silhouetted against the night sky. "Welcome to Copper Creek, Miss Daniels. I think you'll find that standing tall is no disadvantage in the West." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia arranged her classroom, cataloged the available textbooks, woefully few, and created lesson plans for students of widely varying ages and abilities. Her trunks arrived as promised, and soon her cottage felt like home, filled with books, small mementos, and the practical necessities she'd brought from Boston. On Saturday afternoon, as Olivia was preparing teaching materials at her kitchen table, the sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Looking out the window, she saw Grant Lawson riding toward her cottage, leading a beautiful chestnut mare. "Good afternoon, Miss Daniels," he called as she stepped onto her porch. "I thought you might appreciate some transportation. The walk to town is pleasant enough in good weather, but when winter comes, you'll want a horse." Olivia descended the steps, eyeing the mare with appreciation. "She's lovely, but I'm afraid I can't accept such a generous gift." Grant shook his head. "Not a gift. She belongs to the school. The previous teacher used her, but she's been in my stable since Mrs. Wilkins passed. Penny's gentle but spirited, rather like her new mistress, I suspect." The mare nudged Olivia's shoulder with her velvety nose, as if agreeing with Grant's assessment. "Do you ride, Miss Daniels?" Grant asked. "I do, though it's been some time," she admitted. "In Boston, it wasn't considered entirely proper for a young woman to ride astride." Grant's eyes twinkled. "Well, you're in Colorado now. Out here, practicality trumps propriety. I've taken the liberty of including a lady's saddle, and a regular one, your choice entirely." Olivia stroked the mare's neck, already charmed. "Thank you. Mr. Lawson, Penny and I will become well acquainted." "Perhaps you'd like to reacquaint yourself with riding," he suggested. "I could show you some of the countryside. It might help you get your bearings." The invitation was tempting. Olivia had been cooped up in the cottage and schoolhouse for days, and the rolling hills beyond beckoned invitingly. "I'd like that," she said, though I should change into something more suitable. While Olivia changed into her plainest skirt and a sturdy shirtwaist, Grant secured Penny to the hitching post and unloaded a saddle from his pack horse. When Olivia emerged, Grant raised an eyebrow at her divided skirt. "Practical," he commented approvingly. "A concession to frontier life," she replied, slightly embarrassed. "My sister was scandalized when I had it made." Grant helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Once she was settled, he swung easily onto his own horse, a powerful black gelding. "We'll take it slowly," he promised, guiding his horse alongside hers. "Penny knows these trails well." They rode at a leisurely pace, Grant pointing out landmarks and boundaries. "That's the Hendersons' place to the north. They have 3 children who'll be in your school. To the east is the Taylor farm. Their twins are 5, just starting this year." As they crested a hill, Grant reined his horse to a stop. Before them stretched a breathtaking vista, rolling grasslands giving way to foothills, and beyond them, the majestic Rocky Mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the late summer heat. "It's magnificent," Olivia breathed. "This is why I stayed," Grant said quietly. "After my mother died, my father wanted to return east, but I couldn't leave this land. There's a freedom here you can't find in cities." Olivia understood. Already she felt herself changing, shedding the constraints of Eastern society like an ill-fitting garment. They continued riding, eventually reaching a clear stream where they stopped to rest the horses. "May I ask you something, Miss Daniels?" Grant said as they sat on sun-warmed rocks by the water's edge. "Of course. What brought you to Copper Creek? Teaching positions are plentiful in the East, with far more comforts than we can offer." Olivia considered her answer carefully. "I wanted something different. In Boston, I didn't quite fit the mold of what a young lady should be." "Because of your height?" he asked perceptively. She smiled ruefully. "Partly, but also my interests. My education, my reluctance to simpering at gentlemen callers. My sister called me hopeless." "Her loss is our gain," Grant said simply. "Out here, we value substance over appearances." As they rode back toward her cottage, Olivia found herself sharing stories of her childhood, her education at a progressive women's seminary, her love of literature and science. Grant proved an attentive listener, asking intelligent questions and offering insights of his own. By the time they returned to her cottage, the afternoon was waning, golden light slanting across the landscape. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Lawson," Olivia said as he helped her dismount. "And for Penny." "My pleasure, Miss Daniels." His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Perhaps we could make this a regular excursion. There's much more countryside to explore." "I'd like that," she replied, surprised by how much she meant it. The following Monday morning, Olivia stood nervously before her classroom, 23 curious faces staring back at her. The children ranged from tiny Emma and James Walker, the 5-year-old twins, to strapping 16-year-old Henry Jenkins, who looked as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Good morning," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Miss Daniels, and I'm delighted to be your teacher." By mid-morning, Olivia had begun to assess the varying educational levels of her students. Some, like Emma Peterson, were remarkably advanced in reading and arithmetic. Others could barely form their letters. Organizing them into appropriate groups would be challenging but necessary. At noon, the children spilled out into the schoolyard for lunch. Olivia sat at her desk, making notes about each student, when a knock sounded at the open door. Grant Lawson stood in the doorway, holding a small basket. "I thought you might appreciate some lunch, Miss Daniels. First days can be all-consuming." "That's very thoughtful," she said, genuinely touched. "Please, come in." He placed the basket on her desk and removed a checkered cloth, revealing fresh bread, cheese, sliced apples, and 2 jars of cool cider. "This is lovely," Olivia said, suddenly aware of her hunger. "Will you join me?" They shared the impromptu picnic, Olivia describing her initial impressions of her students while Grant offered insights about their families and backgrounds. "Henry Jenkins is resistant," Olivia observed. "Though clearly intelligent." Grant nodded. "His father needs him on their ranch. He's only here because his mother insisted he finish his education. Show him how learning can be practical that might reach him." "Thank you for the advice. I suspect you know these children better than anyone." I've watched most of them grow up, Grant acknowledged. When you live in a small community like this, everyone's story becomes intertwined with your own. Before leaving, Grant hesitated. The harvest social is Saturday evening at the town hall. The whole community attends. As our new school teacher, you'd be an honored guest. Is that an invitation, Mr. Lawson? Olivia asked, a smile playing at her lips. It is indeed, Miss Daniels. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me? His formal phrasing made her smile widen. I would be delighted, Mr. Lawson. After he left, Olivia found herself humming as she prepared for the afternoon lessons. For the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, she felt truly at home. The rest of the week established a pleasant rhythm. Days were filled with teaching, evenings with lesson preparation and correspondence with her sister back east. Grant stopped by the schoolhouse each day, sometimes bringing a small gift, a jar of honey from his hives, a bouquet of late wildflowers, once a fossil he'd found that he thought might interest her students. On Wednesday afternoon, as the children were practicing their penmanship, Olivia noticed a man watching through the schoolhouse window. He was lean and hard-faced, his eyes cold even at a distance. When he saw Olivia looking, his lips curled in what might have been a smile before he turned and walked away. After dismissing her students, Olivia mentioned the stranger to Emma Peterson, who had stayed to help clean the blackboards. The girl's face grew serious. That sounds like Tom Reeves. He's a bad man, Miss Daniels. Pa says he's been stirring up trouble since he came to the territory. Is he the same man who shot at Mr. Lawson when I arrived? Emma nodded solemnly. Mr. Lawson won some land from him in a legal dispute. Mr. Reeves had been grazing cattle there without permission, and the judge ruled in Mr. Lawson's favor. He's been threatening revenge ever since. The information troubled Olivia. That evening, as she was preparing for bed, she heard a horse approaching her cottage. Peering through the window, she was relieved to see Grant's familiar figure. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, he said when she opened the door, his expression grave. Emma Peterson mentioned Reeves was watching the schoolhouse today. He was, Olivia confirmed. Should I be concerned? Grant's jaw tightened. Reeves is unpredictable and vindictive. I don't think he'd harm you, but the fact that he's showing interest in the school at all worries me. Because of your connection to it? Partly, Grant admitted. Reeves knows I care about the school and the children, but also because you're new here, unestablished. He might see you as vulnerable. Olivia straightened to her full height. I am anything but vulnerable, Mr. Lawson. A smile softened his stern expression. I don't doubt your courage, Miss Daniels, but Reeves is dangerous. Promise me you'll be vigilant and that you'll send word if you see him again. I promise, she said, touched by his concern. Grant reached into his pocket and produced a small object. I'd like you to have this, he said, holding out a silver whistle on a chain. If you're ever in trouble, blow it. Sound carries far in these hills, and I'll hear it from my ranch. Olivia accepted the whistle, her fingers brushing against his. Thank you, she said softly. Though I hope never to need it. He nodded, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. Until Saturday, then. Until Saturday, she echoed. Saturday evening arrived with a flurry of excitement. Olivia spent extra time preparing, washing her hair with lavender water, and arranging it in a style less severe than her usual teaching coiffure. From her trunk, she selected a dress she'd rarely had occasion to wear, embossed in deep blue silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Its fashionable cut emphasizing her slender waist, rather than trying to minimize her height. A knock sounded precisely at the agreed-upon hour. When Olivia opened the door, she had the satisfaction of seeing Grant's eyes widen appreciatively. Miss Daniels, he said, his voice a touch lower than usual. You look beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Lawson, she replied, noting how handsome he looked in his dark suit, his usual cowboy attire, exchanged for more formal clothing. You're quite dashing yourself. He offered his arm, and they walked to his waiting buggy. As they drove toward town, twilight painted the landscape in shades of purple and gold, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. You've made quite an impression on your students, Grant said. Emma Peterson declares you're the smartest person she's ever met, present company included. Olivia laughed. Emma is a bright girl with a gift for flattery. She's right, though, Grant insisted. The children are learning more in 1 week with you than they did in a month with Mrs. Wilkins, God rest her soul. That's kind of you to say, but I've only begun to scratch the surface of what needs to be done. The school library is woefully inadequate, and the older students have no access to science equipment or proper maps. Perhaps we can remedy that, Grant suggested. The cattle sale next month should bring good profits to many families. The school board could organize a fundraising campaign. Their conversation continued easily as they reached town, where the community hall glowed with lamplight, the sounds of music and laughter spilling into the street. Inside, the large room was decorated with autumn harvest themes, corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every corner. As they entered, conversations paused and heads turned. Olivia was acutely conscious of being scrutinized, but the warmth of Grant's hand at her elbow gave her confidence. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. "We make a striking couple," Grant replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "The two tallest people in the county, both uncommonly attractive." Before Olivia could respond to this casual compliment, they were surrounded by well-wishers. Parents of her students, members of the school board, and curious townspeople all wanted to meet the new teacher. Grant remained by her side, introducing her to those she hadn't yet met, and subtly steering her away from the few who seemed overly interested in prying into her personal history. When the music started, Grant led her onto the dance floor. "Do you waltz, Miss Daniels?" "I do, though I must warn you, my height often makes it awkward for my partners." His hand settled at her waist, warm and sure. "We fit perfectly," he said, as they began to move with the music. And they did. For perhaps the first time in her life, Olivia didn't feel ungainly or too tall as she danced. With Grant, she felt graceful, feminine matched. They danced 3 consecutive waltzes before Olivia begged a rest. Grant brought her a cup of punch, and they found a quiet corner where they could observe the festivities. "You dance beautifully," he said. "Like you were made for it." "Only with the right partner," she replied, then blushed at her own boldness. His eyes darkened slightly. "Olivia," he began, using her given name for the first time. Before he could continue, a hush fell over the room. Olivia followed Grant's suddenly tense gaze to the entrance, where Tom Reeves stood, flanked by 2 rough-looking men. Unlike the other attendees in their Sunday best, Reeves wore dusty riding clothes, a gun belt prominently displayed at his hip. "Grant Lawson," Reeves called, his voice carrying in the now silent room. "Didn't expect to find you here playing the gentleman. Thought you'd be out defending your stolen property." Grant's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "This isn't the place for this discussion, Reeves. Take your grievances elsewhere." The sheriff stepped forward. "Tom, you and your boys need to leave. This is a peaceful gathering." Reeves ignored him, his cold eyes finding Olivia. "You must be the new schoolmarm I've heard so much about. Tall, ain't she, boys?" His companions snickered. "Better be careful, madam. Lawson here has a habit of taking things that don't belong to him." Grant moved slightly in front of Olivia, protective, but not possessive. "Miss Daniels is here as my guest, Reeves. I won't have you insulting her." "No insult intended," Reeves said, though his smirk belied his words. "Just offering some friendly advice." Several men from the town had gathered behind the sheriff, their stance making it clear they wouldn't tolerate further disruption. Reeves seemed to recognize the shifting mood. "We'll be on our way. Just wanted to see the famous new teacher for myself." His gaze lingered on Olivia in a way that made her skin crawl. "We'll meet again, miss." After Reeves and his men departed, the tension in the room gradually dissipated. The band resumed playing, though conversations were more subdued. "I'm sorry," Grant said quietly. "Reeves has a talent for poisoning even the most pleasant occasions." "You have nothing to apologize for," Olivia assured him, "though I would like to understand what he meant about stolen property." Grant sighed. "It's a long story, but you deserve to know." He guided her to a bench near the wall. 2 years ago, Reeves attempted to claim a section of land adjacent to my ranch prime grazing land with a year-round spring. He produced documents showing he'd purchased it from a man named Fletcher, who supposedly acquired it from the original landowner. "But the documents were fraudulent?" Olivia guessed. "Completely. I was able to prove that Fletcher never owned the land. In fact, he didn't exist at all. The original deed was still in my name, properly registered with the Territorial Land Office. So the court ruled in your favor. Grant nodded. Reeves had already moved 100 head of cattle onto the land and built a line shack. He was furious when he had to remove them. He's been looking for revenge ever since. And now he seems to be including me in his vendetta, Olivia observed. I'm afraid so, Grant admitted. Being seen with me makes you a target in his eyes. Olivia considered this. Then perhaps we should give him a clear view of his target. She stood and held out her hand. I believe this is a waltz, Mr. Lawson. Shall we continue our evening? Grant's smile was slow and admiring. You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Daniels. They returned to the dance floor, and if they stood a little closer, moved a little more in harmony than before, neither mentioned it. The remainder of the evening passed without incident. Grant introduced Olivia to more of the townspeople, including several prominent ranchers who expressed interest in her ideas for expanding the school's curriculum. When the last dance ended, Grant drove Olivia home beneath a canopy of stars, the night air crisp with the promise of autumn. They talked easily of books they'd both read, places they hoped to see, and the changing seasons in the high country. At her cottage door, Grant took both her hands in his. Thank you for a wonderful evening, despite the interruption. I enjoyed myself immensely, she replied truthfully. He hesitated, then bent slightly to brush his lips against her cheek. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Grant, she whispered, her skin tingling where his mouth had touched. As she prepared for bed, Olivia found herself humming the last waltz they had danced, her body still remembering the feel of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way their steps had matched so perfectly. It was foolish, she told herself, to read too much into one evening. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she felt to Grant Lawson, a connection unlike anything she'd experienced before. The weeks that followed settled into a pleasant routine. Olivia's days were filled with teaching, her evenings often enlivened by Grant's visits. Sometimes he brought books from his extensive library, other times news from town or fresh produce from his ranch. They rode together every Saturday, exploring the countryside and growing ever more comfortable in each other's company. October brought crisp mornings and golden afternoons, the landscape transformed by autumn's palette. Olivia's students were progressing well, even reluctant Henry Jenkins showing interest in the practical applications of geometry to ranch management. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, as the children were engaged in a geography lesson, Olivia noticed movement outside the schoolhouse window. Tom Reeves sat on horseback about 50 yards away, watching the school with unsettling intensity. Olivia continued her lesson without pause, though she positioned herself to keep Reeves in her peripheral vision. After 15 minutes, he rode away, but the encounter left her uneasy. When school dismissed, Olivia was surprised to find Grant waiting outside, his expression concerned. One of the Peterson boys told me Reeves was watching the school, he explained. I wanted to make sure you were safe. I'm fine, she assured him. He just watched for a while, then left. Grant's frown deepened. This is the third time in 2 weeks. He's planning something, I'm certain of it. Or simply trying to intimidate us, Olivia suggested. Either way, I won't give him the satisfaction of showing fear. Your courage is admirable, but please be cautious, Grant said. Reeves isn't known for empty threats. That evening, after Grant had gone, Olivia sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of crimson and gold. She'd come to love these quiet moments, the vast open spaces so different from Boston's crowded streets. As darkness fell, Olivia lit the lamps in her cottage and settled down with essays to grade. The October night grew cool, and she built a small fire in the hearth, its warm glow creating a cozy atmosphere. Around 9 o'clock, she heard a horse approaching. Assuming it was Grant returning for the book he'd forgotten earlier, she went to the door without hesitation. The man on her porch was not Grant. Evening, Miss Daniels, Tom Reeves said, his thin smile never reaching his eyes. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Olivia's hand tightened on the doorframe. Mr. Reeves, what brings you here at this hour? Just being neighborly, he replied, though his posture suggested anything but friendly intentions. Thought we should get better acquainted, seeing as how you're new to these parts. I appreciate the thought, but it's rather late for social calls, Olivia said firmly. Perhaps you could come to the school during regular hours if you have educational matters to discuss." Reeves chuckled, a dry sound without humor. "You're a feisty one, aren't you? I can see why Lawson's so taken with you." He stepped closer, forcing Olivia to either retreat into her home or stand her ground. "I'm curious, has he told you about his wife yet?" The question hit Olivia like a physical blow. "I believe you're mistaken, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Lawson isn't married." "Not anymore," Reeves said with malicious satisfaction. "She left him 3 years ago, ran off with a cattle buyer from Denver." Quite the scandal at the time. Olivia struggled to maintain her composure. Grant had never mentioned a wife, former or otherwise. "Mr. Reeves, whatever personal history Mr. Lawson may have is no concern of mine, nor is it a suitable topic for this conversation. Just thought you should know what you're getting yourself into," Reeves said with mock concern. "Lawson doesn't have the best luck with women. First his mother died, then his wife abandoned him. Seems like the women in his life end up suffering." Anger flared in Olivia, burning away her unease. "I think you should leave, Mr. Reeves. Now." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "No offense meant, madam. Just looking out for the town's new schoolteacher." His eyes hardened. "But a word of advice, Lawson's not the man you think he is. And associating with him could prove hazardous to your health." The thinly veiled threat sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She reached for the silver whistle hanging at her neck, but before she could raise it to her lips, Reeves had already turned back toward his horse. "Sleep well, Miss Daniels," he called over his shoulder. "Lock your doors tight tonight." Olivia closed the door with shaking hands, securing both lock and bolt. Through the window, she watched Reeves ride away, his figure soon swallowed by the darkness. For the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, Olivia felt truly afraid. Not for herself. She had faced down harsher men than Tom Reeves in Boston's rough neighborhoods where she'd volunteered at charity schools. No, her fear was for what Reeves might be planning, and for the relationship she'd been building with Grant. Was it true about his wife? Why hadn't he mentioned such a significant part of his past? And more troublingly, was Reeves's visit tonight merely to sow discord? Or was it a prelude to something more sinister? Sleep eluded Olivia that night. By morning, she had made up her mind she would ask Grant directly about his past. Their friendship, and whatever it might be growing into, deserved honesty. The school day passed slowly. Olivia found it difficult to concentrate, her mind returning again and again to Reeves's revelations and insinuations. When the final bell rang, she was relieved to see her students safely collected by parents or heading home in groups. No sign of Reeves or his men in the vicinity. As she was locking the schoolhouse, hoofbeats announced a rider. Turning, Olivia saw Grant approaching, his expression brightening when he spotted her. "I thought I might escort you home," he called, dismounting gracefully. Olivia hesitated, uncertain how to begin the conversation they needed to have. Grant must have sensed her discomfort. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Not wrong exactly," she replied carefully. "But there are matters we should discuss." He nodded, leading his horse alongside her as they walked toward her cottage. "You seem troubled. Has something happened?" "Tom Reeves paid me a visit last night," Olivia said, watching Grant's reaction closely. His entire body tensed, his knuckles whitening on the reins. "Did he threaten you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him. He was unpleasant but not overtly threatening. She paused, then added, "He told me about your wife." Grant stopped walking, his face a study in conflicting emotions, shock, anger, and something that might have been shame. "I see," he said quietly. "And now you have questions." "I do," Olivia admitted. "Not because I judge you for having a past, we all do, but because you never mentioned it, and I learned of it from a man who clearly wishes you ill." They had reached her cottage. Grant secured his horse, then followed Olivia onto the porch. "May I come in? This isn't a conversation I'd prefer to have in the open." Inside, Olivia busied herself making tea, giving Grant time to collect his thoughts. When they were seated at her small kitchen table, steaming cups before them, he began his story. "Her name was Caroline," he said, his voice steady but tinged with old pain. "We married when I was 22, she 19. The daughter of a neighboring rancher, beautiful and vivacious, everything my life seemed to be lacking after my mother's death. He stared into his teacup. For the first year, things were good. Then cattle prices fell, and we struggled. Caroline had grown up in comparative luxury. Her father's ranch was one of the largest in the territory. She wasn't prepared for the hardships of building a life from scratch. "You were young," Olivia said gently. "Both of you." Grant nodded. "Too young, perhaps." Caroline grew increasingly unhappy, resentful of the isolation and the endless work. When a cattle buyer from Denver began making regular trips to the area, she saw her opportunity for escape. She left with him, Olivia supplied. "Yes, 3 years ago, this December." Grant's expression was complex, not angry, but sad and perhaps a little rueful. "I received divorce papers 6 months later. She's married to him now, living in Denver with all the city comforts she craved." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, meaning it. Grant looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I should have told you. It's not something I deliberately conceal, but neither is it a story I enjoy sharing. The truth is, I failed as a husband. I was so focused on making the ranch successful that I neglected Caroline's happiness." "That's a mature perspective," Olivia observed. "Many men would blame the woman entirely." "I've had 3 years to reflect," he said with a slight smile, "and to realize that while the end of our marriage was painful, it was also necessary. We weren't suited to each other, though we couldn't see it when we were young and infatuated." Olivia considered his words, finding in them a thoughtfulness she respected. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I appreciate your honesty." "I should have told you sooner," Grant acknowledged, "but I feared it might change how you saw me. My failure with Caroline is not something I'm proud of." "We all have regrets," Olivia said softly. "Parts of our past we wish we'd handled differently." Grant's hand moved across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Reeves told you this to create distance between us. He knows that He stopped abruptly. "That you what?" Olivia prompted, her heart suddenly beating faster. "That I care for you," Grant finished, his voice low and earnest. "More than I've cared for anyone in a very long time." The confession hung in the air between them, transforming the atmosphere in the small kitchen. Olivia found herself unable to look away from his intense gaze. "I care for you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant's fingers entwined with hers. "Olivia, I need you to understand something. Reeves is dangerous, and he's targeted you because of your connection to me. If you want to step back from our friendship, I would understand." "Is that what you want?" she asked, holding her breath for his answer. "No," he said firmly. "What I want is to continue seeing you, getting to know you better, exploring whatever this is between us, but not at the cost of your safety or peace of mind." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I've never been one to let threats determine my choices, Grant. I won't start now." Relief and something warmer flooded his expression. "You're remarkable. Do you know that?" "So you've said before," she replied with a small smile. "Though I'm merely being practical. Reeves would win if he succeeded in driving us apart." Grant's thumb traced circles on her palm, sending pleasant shivers up her arm. "There's another matter I should mention while we're being honest with each other. The cattle sale is next week in Denver. I'll be gone for about 10 days. "I'll miss our rides," Olivia said, surprised by how much the thought of his absence affected her. "As will I, but the sale is crucial for the ranch's finances." He hesitated, then added, "I've spoken to Sheriff Taylor about keeping an eye on the school and your cottage while I'm gone, just as a precaution." Olivia nodded, appreciating his concern without feeling smothered by it. "I'll be fine, Grant. I've got 23 children and their parents looking out for me, not to mention Mrs. Peterson, who checks on me daily as if I were her own daughter." His smile returned. "You've made quite an impression on this community in a short time." "The feeling is mutual," Olivia said honestly. "I've never felt so at home anywhere as I do here." They talked until twilight deepened into night, their conversation ranging from books and philosophy to childhood memories and dreams for the future. When Grant finally rose to leave, Olivia walked him to the door, reluctant to see the evening end. On the threshold, Grant turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "Olivia, when I return from Denver, there's something important I'd like to discuss with you." Her pulse quickened. "That sounds ominous." "Not at all," he assured her, his smile returning. Quite the opposite, in fact. He took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and thrilling. Until then, be safe. You as well, she replied, oddly breathless. After he'd gone, Olivia stood in her doorway, watching his figure recede into the darkness. For the first time in her life, she found herself contemplating a future very different from the independent existence she'd planned, a future that included Grant Lawson in a role far more significant than friend or neighbor. The possibility both terrified and exhilarated her. The next week passed with agonizing slowness. Olivia threw herself into her teaching, introducing new projects to keep both her students and herself engaged. She began a school newspaper, with the older children writing articles about local events and the younger ones contributing artwork and simple stories. True to his word, Sheriff Taylor rode by the school each morning and afternoon, tipping his hat to Olivia and sometimes stopping for a brief chat. There was no sign of Tom Reeves or his men, though Olivia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched when she walked home in the evenings. On Friday, a week after Grant's departure for Denver, Olivia dismissed her students early. A storm was brewing in the west, dark clouds piling against the mountains, and she wanted the children safely home before it hit. As the last student disappeared down the road, Olivia quickly gathered her materials and locked the schoolhouse. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of the season's first real cold snap. Mounting Penny, Olivia urged the mare into a trot, hoping to reach her cottage before the storm broke. They were halfway home when the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a steady downpour. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed by a crack of thunder that made Penny sidestep nervously. "Easy, girl," Olivia soothed, patting the mare's wet neck. "We're almost home." As they rounded the bend that led to her cottage, Olivia saw something that made her blood run cold. 3 riders waited on the road ahead, their figures indistinct through the curtain of rain, but unmistakably blocking her path. Instinctively, Olivia reined Penny to a halt, considering her options. She could turn back toward town, but that would mean a longer ride in the worsening storm. Or she could cut across the open field to her left, hoping to circle around to her cottage from another direction. Before she could decide, one of the riders spurred his horse forward, and Olivia recognized Tom Reeves's lean silhouette. "Miss Daniels!" he called above the storm's noise. "Nasty weather for a lady to be out alone." Olivia's hand went to the whistle at her throat, but she knew its sound wouldn't carry far in the howling wind. Instead, she straightened in her saddle, refusing to show fear. "Mr. Reeves," she acknowledged coolly, "I'm in a hurry to get home before this storm worsens. Please excuse me." She moved to guide Penny around the men, but Reeves maneuvered his horse to block her path again. "No rush," he said, his smile visible even through the rain. "We thought you might appreciate an escort. Roads can be dangerous for a woman alone, especially one associated with Grant Lawson." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Olivia's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "The sheriff is expecting me. When I don't arrive home on time, he'll come looking." Reeves laughed. "Sheriff Taylor's busy with a disturbance at the saloon. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" Olivia's mind raced. The cottage was tantalizingly close. She could see its outline through the trees. If she could somehow get past these men, an idea formed. Reaching into her satchel as if looking for something, Olivia suddenly yanked out her umbrella and snapped it open directly in front of Reeves's horse. The animal reared in surprise, forcing Reeves to focus on controlling his mount. In that moment of confusion, Olivia dug her heels into Penny's flanks, urging the mare forward at a gallop, straight between 2 of the startled riders. "Get her!" she heard Reeves shout behind her as she bent low over Penny's neck, the wind and rain lashing at her face. The mare responded magnificently, her powerful legs eating up the distance to the cottage. Behind them, Olivia heard the thunder of pursuing hooves, gaining with every stride. Reaching her cottage, Olivia practically threw herself from the saddle, stumbling onto her porch. Her hands shaking with cold and fear, she fumbled with her key. Glancing over her shoulder to see Reeves and his men closing in, the door finally swung open. Olivia darted inside, slamming it shut and throwing the bolt just as boots thudded onto her porch. "Open up, Miss Daniels," Reeves called, his voice deceptively pleasant. "We just want to talk." "Leave my property immediately," Olivia shouted through the door, "or I'll be forced to protect myself." Laughter greeted her words. "Protect yourself? With what? Lawson's not here to save you, schoolmarm." "I don't need Grant Lawson to save me," Olivia replied, retrieving her father's derringer from its hiding place in a drawer. The small gun felt heavy in her hand, but she was grateful for its presence. Through the window, she saw Reeves gesture to his men. One moved toward the back of the cottage, while the other remained mounted, watching the road. A crash from the rear of the cottage told Olivia they were trying to force entry through the back door. She moved quickly to her bedroom, positioning herself where she could see both entrances. The storm had intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling around the eaves. Lightning illuminated the room in brief, stark flashes, followed by deafening thunder. The back door splintered inward. Olivia raised the derringer, her hand steadier than she would have expected. "That's far enough," she called as a figure appeared in the doorway. "I'm armed, and I know how to use this." The man hesitated, clearly not having anticipated resistance. In the next flash of lightning, Olivia recognized one of the men who had accompanied Reeves to the harvest social. "Boss," he called over his shoulder. "She's got a gun." Reeves appeared behind him, his expression shifting from confidence to wary respect as he saw the derringer pointed at his chest. "Now, Miss Daniels, there's no need for that. We're just having a friendly conversation." "There's nothing friendly about breaking into my home," Olivia replied, her voice remarkably calm. "State your business and then leave." Reeves stepped forward, ignoring the gun. "My business is with Lawson, but since he values you, you've become part of that business. I want him to understand what happens when he takes what's mine." "The land was never yours," Olivia said. "The court established that." "Courts!" Reeves spat the word. "Eastern men in fancy clothes who've never set foot on the land they're judging. Out here, possession matters more than papers." Another flash of lightning illuminated the tension-filled room. In that instant, Olivia saw Reeves's hand move toward his gun belt. "Don't," she warned, her finger tightening on the trigger. Reeves froze, then slowly raised his hands. "You won't shoot me, schoolmarm. You don't have it in you." "I grew up with 3 brothers who taught me to shoot when I was 12, Olivia lied smoothly. "And while I'd prefer not to demonstrate that skill in my own home, I will if necessary." For a long moment, they stood in a tense standoff, the only sounds the howling wind and the drumming of rain on the roof. Then, from outside, came the distant thunder of approaching horses, many horses. Reeves's head snapped toward the sound. "Jenkins," he called to the man watching the road. "Who's coming?" "Can't tell in this rain, boss," came the reply, "but it's at least 5 riders coming fast." Indecision flickered across Reeves's face. Then, with a curse, he backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he told Olivia, "not by a long shot." As quickly as they had arrived, Reeves and his men were gone, disappearing into the storm just as new riders approached the cottage. Olivia lowered the derringer, her legs suddenly wobbly with delayed shock. A moment later, a familiar voice called her name from outside. "Olivia, are you in there? It's Grant." Relief flooded through her. Setting aside the gun, Olivia rushed to the front door and threw it open. Grant stood on her porch, rain-soaked and mud-spattered, his face tight with worry. Behind him were 4 ranch hands, all armed and alert. "Thank God," he breathed, pulling Olivia into a fierce embrace. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you?" "I'm fine," she assured him, her voice muffled against his wet coat. "How did you know?" "Emma Peterson," Grant explained, keeping one arm around Olivia as he led her back inside. "She saw Reeves and his men heading this way after school, let out and rode to meet me on the Denver road. I was already on my way back and finished my business early." Olivia's legs finally gave out, and she sank onto a chair, the enormity of what had just happened washing over her. "They broke in," she said, gesturing toward the splintered back door. "Reeves said he wanted to show you what happens when you take what's his." Grant's expression darkened. "This ends now," he said grimly. "Johnson," he called to one of his men, "ride for the sheriff. Tell him what's happened here. The rest of you secure the cottage and stable Miss Daniels' horse." As the men moved to carry out his instructions, Grant knelt beside Olivia's chair, taking her cold hands in his. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This is my fault. I should never have left you alone." Don't be ridiculous, Olivia replied, finding strength in her indignation. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Besides, you couldn't have known Reeves would choose today to make his move. Grant's thumb traced the line of her jaw. You're shaking, he observed softly. It's the cold, she lied, but didn't pull away from his touch. His green eyes searched her face. When I heard you were in danger, he said quietly, I've never ridden so hard in my life. The thought of losing you before I'd even had the chance to... He broke off, seeming to struggle with his words. Before you'd had the chance to what? Olivia prompted, her heart suddenly racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Instead of answering, Grant leaned forward and kissed her. His lips were cool from the rain, but warmed quickly against hers. Olivia's surprise lasted only an instant before she was kissing him back, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, his rain-dampened hair. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Grant rested his forehead against hers. I was going to wait, he murmured, do this properly when I return from Denver, but seeing you endanger life's too uncertain to waste time on propriety. What exactly were you planning to do properly? Olivia asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Grant smiled, his expression a mixture of tenderness and determination. Ask you to marry me. Despite having anticipated his words, Olivia felt her breath catch. We've known each other barely 2 months, she said, practical even as her heart soared. Long enough to know what matters, Grant replied. I love your intelligence, your courage, your kindness. I love the way you look at the world clear-eyed but hopeful. I love who I am when I'm with you. He took her hands in his. I love you, Olivia Daniels, more than I thought possible after Caroline left. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. I never expected this, she admitted. When I came west, I'd resigned myself to a life alone, focused on my teaching, my independence. And now, Grant asked, his voice steady, but his eyes revealing his vulnerability. Now I find that independence isn't the same as happiness, Olivia said softly. These past weeks with you have shown me that. I love you too, Grant, more than I have words to express. His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Is that a yes? It's a yes, Olivia confirmed, laughing through her tears. Though I'd appreciate a proper proposal when we're not both soaking wet and recovering from a home invasion. Grant laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. You'll get one, I promise. With all the traditional elements, perhaps minus kneeling in the mud. He pulled her into his arms again, and this time their kiss held all the promise of the future they would build together. The sheriff arrived an hour later, looking grim and determined. After taking Olivia's statement and examining the damaged door, he promised to organize a posse at first light. Reeves has gone too far this time, he declared, breaking into a lady's home, threatening her that's not just a personal grudge anymore, that's criminal behavior. Grant, who had not left Olivia's side since his arrival, nodded in agreement. He needs to be stopped, Sheriff, permanently. We'll handle this legally, the lawman cautioned. I know you want blood after what he did to Miss Daniels, but frontier justice isn't the answer. After the sheriff departed, Grant's men set about making temporary repairs to the back door and securing the cottage for the night. Grant himself built up the fire and helped Olivia prepare a simple meal, moving around her small kitchen with surprising domesticity. You cook? She asked, watching him competently slice potatoes for a skillet hash. Bachelor ranchers either learn to cook or starve, he replied with a grin, though I'll admit my repertoire is limited. As they ate by firelight, the storm gradually subsided, rain giving way to a gentle patter against the roof. Grant's men had taken up positions around the cottage, 2 on the porch, 2 in the stable with the horses. You don't need to stay, Olivia said, though she was grateful for his presence. I'm sure you're exhausted from your journey. Grant shook his head. I'm not leaving you tonight. Reeves is unpredictable and angry. Besides, he added with a gentle smile, I've been away from you for a week. I'm in no hurry to leave. Later, as Olivia prepared for bed, Grant made himself comfortable in the rocking chair by the fire, a rifle across his knees. Get some rest, he urged. I'll keep watch. Despite the evening's trauma, Olivia slept soundly, comforted by Grant's presence in the next room, and the knowledge that her feelings for him were reciprocated. She woke at dawn to find him still in the chair, his eyes alert despite the night's vigil. Any sign of trouble? She asked, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. None, Grant reported. My men rotated watches through the night. All quiet. As Olivia prepared breakfast, Grant stepped outside to confer with his ranch hands. When he returned, his expression was troubled. The sheriff's posse found Reeves's camp abandoned, he reported. They'd cleared out during the night, probably heading for the territorial border. So he's gone? Olivia asked, relief evident in her voice. For now, Grant said cautiously. But men like Reeves don't give up easily. He'll be back eventually. And we'll be ready, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. Grant's expression softened as he looked at her. We certainly will. Together. After breakfast, Grant reluctantly prepared to leave. I need to check on the ranch after being away, he explained. And you have lesson plans to prepare for Monday, I imagine. I do, Olivia confirmed. Life continues, despite Tom Reeves's best efforts to disrupt it. Grant smiled at her practical attitude. I'll return this evening, if that's acceptable. Very acceptable, Olivia assured him. Before mounting his horse, Grant pulled Olivia into his arms for a lingering kiss. I meant what I said last night, he murmured against her hair. I love you, Olivia Daniels. And I love you, she replied, still marveling at how natural the words felt. The weekend passed peacefully. True to his word, Grant returned Saturday evening with a proper dinner: roast beef, potatoes, and a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. After dinner, they sat before the fire, Grant's arm around Olivia's shoulders as they discussed their future together. The ranch house needs work, Grant admitted. It's been a bachelor's dwelling for too long, but there's room for a proper library and the view from the front porch is spectacular at sunset. It sounds wonderful, Olivia said, leaning into his embrace, though I'll need to fulfill my teaching contract for the year. Of course, Grant agreed immediately. I wouldn't ask you to abandon your students midterm. Besides, a long engagement gives us time to prepare properly. Olivia smiled at his consideration. This was so different from what she'd observed in Boston, where women were expected to sacrifice their own interests and ambitions at the altar of matrimony. What about children? Grant asked hesitantly. Is that something you want? Yes, Olivia answered without hesitation. Though I'd like to continue teaching, at least until our family grows too demanding. The school board would be fools to lose you, Grant said. Perhaps we could arrange for an assistant teacher, someone who could take over when necessary, but allow you to remain involved. His willingness to find solutions rather than present ultimatums only confirmed Olivia's certainty that she had found a true partner. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having washed the landscape clean. Grant arrived early to escort Olivia to church, where their entrance together caused a ripple of interested murmurs among the congregation. After the service, Mrs. Peterson approached them, her expression knowing. I see my Emma's midnight ride brought more than just rescue, she observed, her eyes twinkling as she glanced at their clasped hands. Your daughter's bravery may have saved Miss Daniels' life, Grant said seriously. We're deeply grateful. And yes, Olivia added with a smile, it did precipitate certain declarations that might otherwise have waited. News of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. By the time they left the church, they had received dozens of congratulations and well wishes. Small towns, Grant murmured as they walked toward his buggy. No secrets. I don't mind, Olivia replied. It's nice to be part of a community that cares. The following week settled into a new rhythm. Olivia continued teaching, her days filled with lessons, and her evenings often spent with Grant, planning their future together. They set a wedding date for the following June, after the school term ended, giving them time to prepare both the ranch house and the celebration. November brought colder weather and the first snowfall, transforming the landscape into a winter wonderland. The children were especially excited, their energy infectious as they built snow forts during recess and drew frost patterns on the schoolhouse windows. There had been no sign of Tom Reeves since the night of the storm. According to the sheriff, he and his men had crossed into Wyoming territory, where they were reportedly causing trouble for ranchers near Cheyenne. The news brought relief, but not complete ease. Grant still insisted on escorting Olivia home each day, and she had not yet returned to riding alone on the weekends. As Thanksgiving approached, the school prepared for its annual celebration. The children rehearsed poems and songs, created decorations from colored paper and pine cones, and helped clean the schoolhouse for the community gathering that would be held there. On the day before the celebration, as Olivia was hanging the last of the decorations, she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the window, she saw several riders approaching the schoolhouse at a gallop, Grant in the lead, his expression urgent. Heart pounding, Olivia hurried outside. "What's happened?" she called as Grant dismounted. "Reeves," he said grimly. "He's back. Sheriff Taylor spotted him and 2 of his men on the North Road this morning." Cold fear gripped Olivia's heart. "The children." "That's why I'm here," Grant interrupted. "We need to get them home safely. I've brought men to escort each family." Olivia nodded, moving swiftly back into the schoolhouse. "Children," she announced calmly, though her pulse raced. "We're dismissing early today. Mr. Lawson has arranged for you to be escorted home." Despite her efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy, the children sensed something was wrong. They gathered their belongings quickly, their usual chatter subdued. As the last child departed with one of Grant's ranch hands, Olivia turned to find Grant watching her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "No panic, no alarm." "Years of teaching," Olivia replied with a strained smile. Children respond to the adult's tone more than their words. Grant took her hands in his. "I want you to come to the ranch," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It's more defensible than your cottage, and I have men there who can keep watch." For once, Olivia didn't resist the protective gesture. "All right," she agreed, "but I'll need some things from the cottage." They rode to her home first, where Olivia hastily packed a valise with clothing and essentials. As they were preparing to leave, a rider approached at speed one of Grant's ranch hands, his expression urgent. "Boss," he called, reining his horse to a sliding stop. "Reeves and his boys just burned the line shack on the north pasture. Old Miguel saw the smoke and rode to warn us." Grant's jaw tightened. "Anyone hurt?" "No, sir. Place was empty, thankfully." "He's making his move," Grant muttered, helping Olivia onto her horse. "Johnson, ride to town and tell the sheriff what's happened. Then gather any men he can spare and bring them to the ranch." The ride to Grant's ranch was tense, both of them scanning the landscape for any sign of Reeves or his men. They reached the property without incident, the sprawling ranch house coming into view as they crested a hill. Unlike the rustic cabin Olivia had imagined, the house was substantial and well built, 2 stories of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Barns, corrals, and bunkhouses formed a neat compound around it, the whole establishing a small settlement rather than merely a residence. "It's beautiful," Olivia said as they approached. "It will be," Grant replied, his eyes warm as he looked at her. "Once you've put your touch on it." Inside, the house revealed a curious blend of frontier practicality and Eastern refinement. The large main room featured comfortable, if somewhat worn, furniture arranged before a massive stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that made Olivia's heart leap with recognition. Shakespeare, Dickens, Thoreau, alongside practical texts on ranching, medicine, and law. "My mother's influence," Grant explained, following her gaze to the books. "She insisted we bring the library west with us, despite my father's protests about the wagon space it required." Grant's housekeeper, Mrs. Herrera, a dignified Mexican woman of about 50, greeted Olivia warmly and showed her to a guest room on the 2nd floor. "It is good that El Patron has finally found someone worthy," the woman said approvingly as she helped Olivia settle in. "This house needs a woman's hand, and Mr. Grant needs a wife with both beauty and brains." Olivia blushed at the frank assessment. "Thank you, Mrs. Herrera. I hope I can live up to your expectations." The older woman patted her hand. "You already have, just by being the kind of woman who makes him smile again." Throughout the afternoon, Grant's men prepared the ranch for potential trouble, posting guards, checking weapons, and securing livestock in the nearest pastures. Grant himself moved between tasks with calm efficiency, his experience in handling crises evident in every decision. By evening, the sheriff had arrived with 5 deputies and several town volunteers. They gathered in the ranch house dining room, where Grant spread out a map of his property. "Reeves knows this land," he told the assembled men. "He grazed cattle here illegally for months before the court ordered him off. He'll likely approach from the north, where the tree line provides cover almost to the corrals. The sheriff nodded. We'll position men along that perimeter, but remember, I want Reeves taken alive, if possible. He needs to stand trial for what he's done. Olivia, listening from the doorway, admired the men's methodical planning. This wasn't the wild, uncontrolled violence of dime novels, it was calculated defense against a known threat. As the men dispersed to their positions, Grant found Olivia in the library, where she had been distracting herself with a volume of Emerson's essays. You should try to rest, he suggested, sitting beside her on the leather sofa. It could be a long night. I'm not sure I could sleep, she admitted, closing the book. Not knowing what might happen. Grant took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. I've faced worse odds than this, he assured her, and never with so much to fight for. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Promise me you'll be careful, she whispered. I promise, he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. I have too much to live for to be reckless. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the crackling fire and ticking clock the only sounds in the room. Eventually, Olivia's eyelids grew heavy, despite her concerns, and she dozed against Grant's shoulder. She was awakened by a distant shout, followed by the sharp report of a rifle. Grant was already on his feet, reaching for the gun belt he'd hung on a nearby chair. Stay here, he instructed, buckling the belt around his waist. Mrs. Herrera is in the kitchen. Go to her if you need anything. Be safe, Olivia said, rising to stand before him. Grant cupped her face in his hands, kissing her briefly but intensely. I will. We'll get through this, Olivia. Then nothing will stand in the way of our future together. After he left, Olivia paced the library, listening to the occasional shots and shouts from outside. The waiting was torture, not knowing what was happening, who might be hurt, whether Grant was safe. Unable to remain idle, she made her way to the kitchen where Mrs. Herrera was calmly preparing coffee and sandwiches. The men will be hungry when this is over, the housekeeper explained, slicing bread with precise movements, especially if they must chase these banditos through the night. Olivia admired the woman's practical approach to crisis. How can I help? She asked. For the next hour they worked together, preparing food and boiling water for possible injuries. The sound of gunfire had subsided, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more unnerving. Then came the pounding of boots on the porch, and the front door burst open. Two of Grant's ranch hands carried a third between them, blood staining his shirt. Kitchen table, Mrs. Herrera directed immediately, clearing space with efficient movements. Olivia grabbed clean cloths and the basin of hot water they'd prepared. What happened? She asked, as the men laid their injured companion on the table. Ambush at the north fence line, one explained grimly. Peterson here took a bullet in the shoulder. As Mrs. Herrera cut away the wounded man's shirt, Olivia asked the question foremost in her mind. Grant, is he safe? Last we saw, madam, he and the sheriff were leading a group around to flank Reeves's position. Olivia nodded, focusing on helping Mrs. Herrera clean and bandage the wound. Fortunately, the bullet had passed clean through Peterson's shoulder, missing bone and major vessels. You are lucky, Joven, Mrs. Herrera told the injured man as she applied a poultice of herbs to the wound. A few inches lower, and we would be digging a grave instead of bandaging you. More men arrived, reporting that Reeves and his gang had retreated into the hills, with Grant, the sheriff, and several others in pursuit. Should be back by dawn, if all goes well, one ranch hand said, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. Dawn came and went with no sign of the pursuit party. Olivia, who had not slept since the alarm was raised, stood on the front porch, scanning the horizon for any sign of riders. Mrs. Herrera joined her, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. They will return, she said with quiet confidence. Mr. Grant knows these hills better than anyone. He will not be fooled by Reeves's tricks. As if summoned by her words, a group of riders appeared on the ridge to the north. Even at a distance, Olivia recognized Grant's broad-shouldered silhouette, and her heart leapt with relief. As the riders drew closer, she could see that they were escorting 3 men with their hands bound Reeves and his companions, finally captured. Grant dismounted wearily, handing his reins to a waiting ranch hand. His face was streaked with dirt and what might have been blood, but he smiled when he saw Olivia waiting. It's over, he said simply, taking her hands in his. Reeves is in custody, and he won't be threatening anyone again. The sheriff, equally tired but satisfied, added, "He'll be facing charges of arson, attempted murder, breaking and entering, and threatening a schoolteacher. That's enough to put him away for 20 years at least." As the prisoners were secured in a wagon for transport to the territorial jail, Grant finally allowed himself to be led inside. Mrs. Herrera clucked over a gash on his forearm, insisting on cleaning and bandaging it despite his protests that it was just a scratch. "You have lost enough blood, senor," the housekeeper scolded. "Miss Daniels does not want a corpse for a husband." Later, after Grant had bathed and changed into clean clothes, he found Olivia in the library again, staring out the window at the peaceful landscape. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I was just thinking how quickly life can change," she replied, leaning into him as his arm encircled her waist. 3 months ago, I was a spinster schoolteacher in Boston, resigned to a solitary life. Now I'm in Colorado, engaged to a rancher, and have just survived what amounts to a small war." Grant chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her side. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic." "Do you think it will always be this exciting?" Olivia asked, only half joking. "God, I hope not," Grant replied fervently. "I'm looking forward to some very boring decades with you, Miss Daniels. Peaceful mornings, quiet evenings by the fire, perhaps a few children to keep things interesting during the day." The vision he painted was so appealing that Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "That sounds perfect," she whispered. Grant turned her to face him, his expression suddenly serious. "I know this isn't how either of us planned our lives to unfold," he said, "but I can't help feeling that everything, my failed marriage, your decision to come west, even Reeves's vendetta, all of it led us to each other. They called me too tall back east," Olivia reminded him, smiling through her tears. "If I hadn't been considered unmarriageable there, I might never have come west at all." Grant's laugh was warm and genuine. "Then I'm grateful for the short-sightedness of Boston gentlemen," he said, pulling her closer. "And I meant what I said when we first met. I'll always be taller with you beside me." "Is that a promise, Mr. Lawson?" Olivia asked, her heart full to bursting with love for this remarkable man. "The most solemn promise I'll ever make," Grant replied, sealing his words with a kiss. The wedding took place the following June, just as planned, in the small church in Copper Creek. The entire town turned out for the celebration, the school children forming an honor guard with wildflower garlands as Olivia and Grant emerged as husband and wife. Emma Peterson, now 13 and blossoming into a young lady, served as maid of honor, proudly wearing a dress Olivia had helped her make for the occasion. "You're the most beautiful bride ever," the girl declared as they prepared for the ceremony. "And the tallest," Olivia laughed, no longer sensitive about her height. "Being tall has its advantages," she said, thinking of how perfectly she fit against Grant's side, how their eyes met on the same level when they danced. The ranch house had been transformed in the months leading up to the wedding. Grant had added a larger library, a modern kitchen, and a spacious bedroom suite. Olivia had brought her books and personal treasures, along with new furnishings that blended their tastes' Eastern refinement with Western practicality. Most importantly, they had created a home together, a place where neither of them had to diminish themselves to fit someone else's expectations. That evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Grant wrapped his arms around his new wife. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely," Olivia replied, leaning back against his chest. "Though I'll miss teaching full-time." The school board had been reluctant to lose her, eventually agreeing to a compromise. Olivia would continue as head teacher, with a young woman from Denver assisting her and taking over when necessary. "You'll be the best teacher those children ever had," Grant assured her, "even if it's only part-time, and you'll be the best mother our children could hope for." Olivia turned in his arms, her expression both shy and determined. "About that," she said, "I think we may need to prepare the nursery sooner than we planned." Grant's eyes widened as her meaning registered. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder. Olivia nodded, her smile radiant. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We should expect our first child around Christmas." With a joyous laugh, Grant lifted her off her feet, spinning them both in a circle of pure happiness. When he set her down again, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "I love you, Olivia Lawson," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, standing tall and proud beside the man who had never asked her to be anything less than her full self. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, they sealed their promise with a kiss, two people who had found in each other not just love, but the perfect height from which to view the beautiful life they would build together. 10 years later, Olivia stood on that same porch, watching Grant teaching their eldest son to ride his new pony in the ranch yard. At 9, Grant Jr. called GJ. By everyone was already tall for his age, with his father's green eyes and his mother's serious disposition. Behind her in the house, 7-year-old twins, Elizabeth and Eleanor, were helping Mrs. Herrera bake cookies, their laughter drifting through the open windows. The girls had inherited their mother's height and their father's easy charm, a combination that Olivia suspected would be both blessing and challenge as they grew older. In the cradle beside her rocking chair, 3-month-old Michael slept peacefully, his tiny fists curled against his cheeks. Their surprise late addition had completed the family in ways Olivia hadn't known were missing. The ranch had prospered over the decades since their marriage. Grant's innovative breeding programs had produced cattle better suited to the harsh Colorado winters, and his fair treatment of workers had ensured loyalty during difficult times. Olivia had continued teaching part-time until the twins were born, after which she'd reluctantly stepped back to focus on her growing family. Still, her influence on the school remained strong. She had established a proper library, updated the curriculum, and mentored several young teachers who continued her work. Tom Reeves had served 8 years in the territorial prison before being released the previous spring. Rather than returning to Colorado, he had reportedly headed for California, his thirst for revenge apparently quenched by his time behind bars. As Grant and GJ completed their riding lesson, they dismounted and walked toward the house, the boy chattering excitedly about his progress. "Did you see me, Mama?" GJ called as they approached the porch. "I cantered all by myself." "I saw," Olivia confirmed, her heart swelling with pride. "You're becoming an excellent horseman." Grant ruffled his son's hair. "A few more lessons and you'll be ready to help with the spring roundup." The boy's face lit up at this promise of grown-up responsibility. "Really? Can I?" "We'll see," Grant hedged, exchanging an amused glance with Olivia. "Now, go wash up for dinner. Tell your sisters it's almost time to eat." As GJ darted into the house, Grant climbed the porch steps and bent to press a kiss to his sleeping son's forehead, before straightening to kiss his wife. "You look beautiful," he murmured against her lips. Olivia smiled, appreciating the compliment even after 10 years of marriage. "You need your eyes checked, Cowboy. I'm a 40-year-old mother of 4 with gray in my hair. All I see is the woman I fall in love with more deeply every day," Grant replied, his sincerity evident in his green eyes, now crinkled at the corners from years of Colorado sun. Olivia reached up to trace the lines of his face, marveling at how the decade had only enhanced his appeal. "Remember what you said when we first met?" she asked. "When I told you they called me too tall?" Grant smiled, the memory obviously as clear to him as it was to her. "I said I'd be taller with you beside me," he recalled. "And I was right. Having you at my side has made me stand taller, live better, love more completely than I ever thought possible." As the setting sun bathed them in golden light, their children's voices providing the perfect backdrop to the moment, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true height not in physical stature, but in the love that had allowed her to become fully herself. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me as I am, not as the world thought I should be." Grant's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "Always," he promised. "From that first moment in Copper Creek until our last breath, always." And as they stood together, perfectly matched in height and in heart, Olivia knew it was a promise that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.